بشر مثلنا قالوا ما أنتم إلا بشر مثلنا وما أنزل الرحمن من شيء إن أنتم إلا تكذبون قالوا ربنا يعلم إنا إليكم لمرسلون وما علينا إلا البلاغ المبين قالوا إنا تطيرنا بكم لئن لم تنتهوا لنرجمنكم وليمسنكم منا عذاب أليم قالوا طائركم معكم أئن ذكرتم بل أنتم قوم مسرفون وجاء من أقصى المدينة رجل يسعى قال يا قوم اتبعوا المرسلين اتبعوا من لا يسألكم أجرا وهم مهتدون وما لي لا أعبد الذي فطرني وإليه ترجعون أتخذ من دونه آلهة إن يردني الرحمن بضر لا تغن عني شفاعتهم شيئا ولا ينقذون إني إذا لفي ضلال مبين إني آمنت بربكم فاسمعون قيل ادخل الجنة قال يا ليت قومي يعلمون بما غفر لي ربي وجعلني من المكرمين صدق الله العلي العظيم صلوا على محمد وآل محمد. Assalamu alaikum jami'an. Thank you very much for being here. Inshallah, for today's event, it's going to be titled The Psychology of Arrogance. And so before the Sheikh is going to come in a couple of minutes. So before the Sheikh comes, we would like to have to take your opinions. What do you think arrogance is? So prepared a small menti. If you can go to menti.com and you can put this code over here. And if you can just put what you think arrogance is, just before it's an introduction to the theme. we'll just do 1-2 minutes and we're past to the next question. So, alhamdulillah, I see that we have touched multiple aspects of arrogance that inshallah the Sheikh is going to talk about. But we can see a lot of superiority and the fact of being self-centered. Inshallah, we'll be able to talk about that in depth during the muhadara. Now we have another question. What is one behavior that makes someone seem arrogant? So what is an action that when someone does it, or even like a behavior that will make someone seem arrogant? Maybe I'll wait just 2 more minutes just so we can have more answers. I think also for this question, we touched also two important aspects: the fact of superiority, belittling others, also an interesting point, the ability to apologize. Inshallah, I think when we're going to talk about psychology, we're going to see why someone can achieve this, where he just won't apologize even when he's wrong. Have another question. Now it's more from a solution. I think we all have at least some degree of ego, but how can someone free themselves from arrogance or from arrogant behaviors? Maybe we'll just wait 1, 2 minutes for finalizing the answers. I think we also touched some important points, knowing Allah. So one of the name of Allah is Al-Mutakabbir, so He's the most superior. So inshallah, maybe the Sheikh, if not in this lecture, the next iftar, which is the continuation of this lecture, is going to maybe touch about these solutions and how we can apply them to our lives. I think we have one last question. What can be a barrier to humbleness in your opinion? So we talked about what's arrogance, but what do you think is something that stops people from maybe being humble? Maybe we're gonna wait 2, 3 minutes to maybe have more answers. I think we have some pretty interesting answers for this one. So we have the fact that a barrier to humbleness can be something that's in order of the society, not necessarily or not necessarily at the level of the individual. Also, status, the fact that appearance, the fact that we want to show that something that we're not, to be able to achieve or to satisfy our interests. Inshallah, in all of the presentation or the lecture of the Sheikh today, we're going to touch some of these aspects too. So the Sheikh unfortunately was a bit late. He's going to come in like 5 to 10 minutes, but let me just introduce him before. So let me just. لا خلاص. So صلوا على محمد وآل محمد. So we had the pleasure to have Sheikh Ahmad Haneef in the past. Sheikh Ahmad Haneef is the Sheikh that was originally a Christian. He used to be a DJ and he used to he comes from a country called Trinidad and Tobago. So when he just came. So when he got to university, he got to maybe learn more about religions and ideologies, Marxism, and he was interested in Islam. So he studied in the Qum Hausa, and now he's giving lectures all around the world about experience and all sorts of subjects. So we'll just maybe wait a bit until he comes. If maybe some of the people want to sit on the chairs just so we can have a more cozy lecture with the Sheikh. Sorry about the delay. The Sheikh's gonna come shortly. It's just change. ثانية بأعلى أصواتكم. It's a pleasure to have you. It's a pleasure to have you, Sheikh.
Testing 1, 2, 3. Yeah, sounds okay. Assalamu alaikum, guys. Sorry, I'm kind of late. Am I? I thought you guys were having a program before, so I was taking my time, until the brother showed up. Okay, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Okay, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen wa salatu wa salam ala rasulihi wa habibihi Abdul Qasim al-Mustafa Muhammad. Allahumma salli ala Muhammadin wa ali Muhammad. وعلى أهل بيتي الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين ولعنة أعدائهم أجمعين من الآن إلى يوم الدين. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. You guys don't sound like you're happy to see me here. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Makes you feel better. Okay, so the topic I'd like to talk about today, or was asked to talk about today, is about arrogance, especially about arrogance within the climate of the times that we are living in today. And how, interestingly enough, arrogance is a big sin, a big awful state that that we would go to hellfire for. But at the same time, with respect to our enemies, it is a welcome fault. It is a welcome fault. And I'll explain to you about that, why it is a fault that could work to our benefit. Their arrogance, not ours, their arrogance could work to our benefit. And also, I think, I think we need to sort of examine arrogance in ourselves, okay, in our communities, and remove it from ourselves. Because I think because of our own arrogance, we become victims to those people who are more powerful than us and have more arrogance than us, So in the Holy Quran, Allah talks about arrogance, and the first mention of arrogance is with respect to Iblis. And the story goes that from many ahadith that Iblis was worshiping Allah for over 6,000 years. during the time when the jinn were on the earth. And according to the narratives, it is said that Iblis, who was also known as Azazel at the time, was a very spiritual man, was a very holy man, who excelled in his worship of Allah, to the extent that the people, the other jinn around, came to admire him for his ibadah. And then the angels in the first heaven above us, also came to admire him in terms of how he worshipped so much. And so the angels in the heaven above us asked Allah to bring Iblis or Azazel up to their level. He's still a jinn, but to bring him up to their level so that they could enjoy his company, they could feel happy in his company, in his worship of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And when he got onto that level, he was worshiping Allah even more than those angels, to the extent that the angels in the heavens above that asked Allah to bring him up to their level. Now, when we talk about bringing him up to their level, we have to think about it not in a physical sense, okay? We have to think about it in a different sense, in a sort of a spiritual sense, an existential sense, you know. He will, for example, have certain powers extended upon him on that level, in that realm, you know. So he's becoming more and more angel-like. And this process took place over and over again until he arrived at one of the highest levels, not the highest levels, but one of them, where he was now privileged to be among them when Allah asked the angels to bow down to Adam. I think it's very interesting. I think it's very good that, you know, the story doesn't start with somebody who is rebellious and somebody who doesn't believe in God and so on. I think, you know, most of us would think of an evil person, you know, being someone who doesn't believe in God and so forth. No. Iblis started off as a sheikh. He started off as a sheikh. He started off as a very, very spiritual man, you know, and it is because of his own spirituality that it was his doom. And so I think on that particular level, we have to look at it and analyze this. What made him arrogant? What made him arrogant was that he possessed some kind of advantage, some kind of, he was doing something, he had achieved something that made him think that he was better than Hazrat Adam. Now, when we look at Hazrat Adam, what do we see? We see that Hazrat Adam, first of all, in his physical essence, okay, as a human animal, put it that way, as a body, did not possess the same kind of litafa as Iblis possessed. Okay, Adam was made of black clay. Okay, the name Adam implies, you know, a dark type of complexion, right? Something for us to think about, especially in today's world. And he was a physical being. You know, in some narrations, it said that while Adam was lying, his body was lying in that place, in that garden, before Allah had breathed into him. You know, Iblis came around him and went through his mouth and came out his behind and said, "This being is hollow. You know, I could influence this being." Okay. And so the reasons why Iblis would see himself as superior to Hazrat Adam was because of these two things. One, that Hazrat Adam, in his physical or outer appearance, or his outer manifestation as a body, it was inferior to the smokeless fire, or the pure energy, one could call it that. Some people call it plasma even, the pure energy of Iblis. And secondly, because he had achieved a certain level of spiritual achievement that Hazrat Adam had not yet achieved. And so it's because of this things that he possessed, and comparing him to Adam, he found or thought that he was better than him. I think another lesson for us to learn here, in the sense that, for example, for many of us, we identify with the maqam that we have reached in the world. You know what I mean? Like, for example, you're the best doctor in town, or you're the best teacher in town, or you're the greatest engineer in town, and you look at yourself, and you look at somebody else who has not reached that point. That person is a janitor in a school or something like that, and you say, I am better than him, right? Or for example, you might be more physically equipped. You're more healthy. You're more beautiful. You're more handsome, or whatever. And you say, because of this, I am better than him or her. Okay. So we are seeing this type of thing playing out. Okay. We see this type of thing playing out. All right. Don't stop them too much, guys. The kids. It's all right. It doesn't bother me at all. All right. If it doesn't bother you, it doesn't bother me. Okay. So we see this type of thing happening. And so what we have to be aware of is that we should not associate ourselves with our achievements in terms of our nafs, to say that I am better than anyone, even though I have achieved something, even though I have reached some place. We shouldn't look at ourselves physically, as being better than other people, because again, we are all human beings, and what might seem to be a deficiency in somebody might probably be an advantage that they have. There's a statement that Iblis was the first racist. Iblis was the first racist because what he did was he saw Adam's external form, and he believed that his form was a better form than Hazrat Adam, and so he thought that himself was better than Adam. Okay? Now, when we look at the form of Adam, okay, we realize that there's a reason why Adam is a material being. Okay? And at the same time, Hazrat Adam has an internal state, an internal quality that is not easy to be seen. That is, he knows the names. He knows the names. The names, I guess, we have many, how should I say, debates about what those names are. But I think those names don't need debate, because they are all of these things that we claim that the names are, with the right proofs and so forth, are names on different levels of being. Okay? And so these names, we say, for example, these names are the names of the Ahlillbait alayhim salam, and we have reasons for that. Others are that the names of all things, that Adam alayhi salam knows all things, the names. And when we say the names, it doesn't mean like, we call a thing a lion or a duck or whatever. Okay? A true name is a name that is identical with the identity or the essence of the thing itself. A true name. A true name is something that is identical with the essence of the thing itself. I mean, I could only give you examples in English, but I'm sure you might find examples in French. You have in English type of wording, they call it onomatopoeic wording. All right. For example, you have the word, they usually tend to be associated with sounds. Okay. For example, you have the word buzz, like the buzz of a bee. The very word buzz gives you an idea that there's something with a zzz kind of a sound. You see, so the name and the sound or the thing it's identifying are basically a sort of one and the same. Okay. That's the only one I could come up with right now, but there's a whole lot of them like that. You know what I mean? If any of you guys are in science or in medicine or even in law and so forth, you see how sometimes they refer to certain names. They use certain names, for example, in Latin, that would be more accurate than the English word. Anterior vena cava, posterior vena cava, medial this and distal that, and so forth and so on. Okay. So if you take that to a higher level, a name itself is the embodiment of that thing. And this is one of the secrets of dhikr, that when one repeats particular names of Allah, or when one calls upon Allah by virtue of a particular name, that name resonates with the cosmos, resonates with Allah, resonates with the universe for us to sort of attune ourselves to that name. We get attuned to that name. You know what I mean? So when we, for example, you're saying like La ilaha illallah, and this is why a lot of these Urafa and Sufis and so forth, they do this. They repeat a name until it becomes internalized. And they actually do achieve certain levels of perception that they would not normally achieve when they are, in a normal state. Okay? There's a big difference between the name Allah and God, even though the both of them refer to the same thing. Okay? The power of the name Allah is vaster than the power of the name God. You see? Because with God, you have with an S at the end, it becomes pluralized. With an ESS at the end, it becomes feminized. You see what I mean? But with the name Allah and the names of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and so forth, you don't find that type of problem taking place. So when Adam knows all the names includes all of this. Okay, all the names means that he alone among everything. Okay, if you want to think of the names as the names of God, which is no different from saying that, for example, the true name of something is the name that is in the essence of a certain thing, because everything is basically an expression of Allah's names. Everything. A flower represents the expression of the Jamal of Allah. Okay, a mountain represents the Qudra of Allah, and so forth and so on, the might of Allah. So everything is, from the point of view of the mystics and the Urafa, everything is to some extent or the other a manifestation of the name of Allah within a particular context, within the name of a particular material context, physical context, especially in this world. Yeah. So Adam knew this, and what it indicates is that us, as the Bani Adam, we also have this potential of knowing Allah more than anything else. Iblis didn't know this. Although Iblis was a religious person and spiritual and so forth, Iblis had a limited intelligence, a limited knowledge of the truth of Deen. And this is why the angels bow down to Adam, because Adam had this advantage over all of them, this inner reality of himself that no other could come. And so in Adam's form, for example, Adam's outward appearance as a human being, as an animal, his animal form, indicates on the level of symbol how Adam is a complete being. He is a complete being in the sense that Adam represents in himself both the lower worlds and the higher worlds. The lower worlds in his outward form, where he is the only creature that walks on two legs upright. chickens and hens and eagles and so on walk on two legs too, but their axis is a horizontal axis. Here's the earth and there's their body. All animals walk on four legs. One might say, well, okay, what about a bear? A bear does walk on four legs. You know what I mean? An ape walks on four legs. Yes, it can stand on two, it could run on two, but its tendency is to go forward in terms of their body moving forward like that so that they could be horizontal to the earth. Okay? Being horizontal to the earth indicates that you cannot escape that. This is why, for example, when animals die, there's no heaven for them. Okay? You know, the animals have souls, but their souls die with their bodies. Whereas a human soul transcends the body, you know, and moves upward. And so the human being stands and walks upright, meaning that within that human being, the hidden aspects, the invisible aspects, the inner aspects of his of that person's godlike nature. I don't say a god, but a godlike nature, in so far as that human being is an expression of Allah's names on the earth in a greater totality than any other thing. Okay? In a greater totality than any other thing, that human being encompasses that in themselves. I mean, take for example, Jamal, okay? The name Jamal. You know, a flower can be beautiful, but a flower doesn't have intelligence. A flower doesn't have consciousness. A flower doesn't have power, you see? But it's beautiful, you know? Whereas a human being could be beautiful outwardly and inwardly. And the inner beauty of a human being is much higher than their outer beauty. And not only this, a human being has intelligence. A human being has analytical ability. A human being gathers knowledge. A human being can change the world. A human being can have, an effect upon the world and so forth. So this human being actually does have a higher potential. So when Iblis is looking at Adam, what Iblis on the physical level is seeing, he is seeing that is something as a body is inferior to him, which is true. It is inferior as a body to the smokeless fire, as a physical body to the smokeless fire. But he himself is deficient by not having a physical body. He's deficient by not having a physical body, which would indicate that Adam encompasses all of the worlds, all of the universes, everything in himself. You understand? You know, Imam Ali alayhi salam has a very beautiful statement about that. You know, don't look at yourself as being just a small being. In you are all the universes, everything. You know, all of creation is in you. He who knows himself knows his Lord. Okay, what does this mean? It means that we have this type of, we are created in this way, to be able to reflect God in a metaphorical sense. All right. That upright gait, that the fact that he has this physical form, and also he has this aspect in himself, he might not know how to activate it. The Holy Prophet did. Imam Ali alayhi salam did. All the Imams did. That we could, for example, dominate nature. I'm sure you have heard of Tahil Arz, for example. The folding of the earth or the folding of space, where you could how should I say, nullify the speed of light, okay, and fold space, and you could go from one place to another in just a step. This is something that only the human being can do with the help of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So Iblis is looking at him only on a superficial level. Why? Because he sees himself only, okay, as the center of the universe. So arrogance is related to egotism, egocentrality, okay? Arrogance is like, I see everything with respect to me. And when we look at history, we see how Europe in particular and America in general, how they saw other civilizations that were superior to theirs. If you investigate, for example, the Victorian period, which coincided with the heights of colonialism, you'd find that in the Victorian period, people didn't take baths because they thought that baths would open up your pores to what they call miasma and you can die really fast. You know what I mean? They did not have, sewer systems and stuff like that to remove waste and so forth. And then when they left much earlier and they came into the Muslim world and into not just the Muslim world, the Chinese world and the African world, and the Aztec world and so forth, you would find that, these people had, flushing toilets and running water, and people were always sweeping the streets, whilst in Victorian England, they were throwing their refuse and their dirt on the street and so forth. It was really nasty, you see? And so they go to these places and they say, oh, these people are better than us. And I don't like that because I want to be better than them. So what did they do? They stole everything that we had. One thing that was very important for them was, why did they conquer the world? They conquered the world which I would say they had two advantages that they had developed over time. Okay, because Europe was a divided environment where they were always at war with each other. One of the things they developed was weapons. They were advanced in weapons because they were too busy killing each other. And so they would look at things, and they would weaponize things. I mean, I want to give you an example of the encounter with Chinese gunpowder. The Chinese had gunpowder, but they never used gunpowder as a missile or something like to make a bullet or something like that, or a bomb. They never did that. Why? Because they thought that the heights of bravery and courage was to be able to fight physically with your enemy. Okay, to be able to fight physically with your enemy. When you're standing with a sword and this other guy is standing with your sword, you're aware that it's either your head will be falling on the ground or his head is going to be falling on the ground. And so you are able to, you practice and you become really good at your craft and you're not afraid. You had the culture of a warrior, for example. And this is why, for example, you'd find that warriors respected warriors, even though they were on both sides, different sides, they respect each other. Today you have a guy with a high-powered rifle, I don't know, a mile away, killing somebody a mile away. You know what I mean? You have hadith that talk about in the last days, people would be killed, and they don't know who killed them. You see? You need these snipers and these bombs and so forth and so on. That explains why, for example, on a religious level, Iran does not pursue nuclear weapons. Okay? So, so they would go into these places. I remember when we talked in history, they talked about the destruction of Benin. Okay, when the European colonists went into Benin, which was a very, very big city. I mean, it was surrounded by a wall that was longer and bigger than the Great Wall of China. Could you imagine that? Okay, and the art and all of these things. What did these Europeans do? They destroyed the entire thing, and grabbed all of the great sculptures and so forth that they had not been able to achieve in these type of sculptures with iron and stuff like that, and took it back to England and France and these places, and it's still there today, right? Things that they plundered and they stole is still there today. And when the people want their stuff back, they say, no, we can't give it back to you because we can take care of your stuff better than you. Okay, this is arrogance. Arrogance is seeing yourself as central when even you don't even have any true reason to think that you are central. And this is the kind of thing that they did. So they went all over the place. They destroyed everybody's culture. They destroyed everybody's science, but they took the science for themselves. So when you ask, for example, who invented the camera obscura? They would say some European guy, when in fact it was Jabir ibn Hayyan, for example. Who discovered the circulation of blood. You know, they will say, I can't remember what his name was, some European guy. You know what I mean? When it was somebody they found in the what do you call it? The Darul Hikmah, you know, in Iraq. You know, algebra, all of these other things, all these things that without the Muslims, you know, they could have never advanced. They stole these things and they rewrote history and made it sound like if they were the ones that had discovered all of these things. And this is what they've been teaching us in our schools in the West, you know, up to this particular point in time. This is arrogance, okay? This is Europe seeing itself, Europe and Europeans, and by extension, a lot of white people, yes, a lot of white people, okay, see themselves as superior to other people. And that's what they say, you know, that we are superior to other people. How do they envision Muslims, for example? They envision Muslims as barbarians. They envision Muslims as misogynists. They envision Muslims as people who don't like freedom. They envision Muslims as backward and as savage and so forth. Where did that come from? Okay, where did that come from? That comes from their arrogance, because the arrogant person does not like to see somebody in a higher state than them. Okay, so when Allah said bow down to Adam, you know, the angels, either because they already had seen other people like Adam, and yes, there wasn't only one Adam. Somebody asked Imam Bakr alayhi salam, tell me about Adam, and Imam Bakr alayhi salam said, which Adam do you want me to talk to you about? The man said, well, were there more than one Adam? He said there were a million Adams, Alf Adam, and a million Earths, or a million version of the Earths, and this Adam is the most recent one. Okay, so when the angels, and of course before the jinn were on the earth too, and they were fighting wars and so forth. So when the angels said, well, why should we bow down to him? Look at what he's going to do. We already saw what these type of beings would do. Okay, they would spill blood and so forth and create all kinds of damages and so forth. Why should we bow down to him? Okay, and this is how, when Allah taught Adam the names, and he showed them the names, the things that are the names applied to. They didn't know these things, and when Adam taught them the names, then they bowed down. So now, we have Iblis, and he's not bowing down, okay? And this goes to another characteristic of arrogance. He's not bowing down. And Allah asked him, why didn't you bow down to Adam? What did he say? He said, I am better than him. You made me of smokeless fire, and you made him of clay. Now, if he was intelligent, okay, he would use the same reasoning that Allah presented to the angels, correct? Use the same reasoning to say why he's better than him. I mean, if I was in this position, I'd say something like, you didn't ask me, I could have told you the names. Right? You know what I mean? Right? I could have told you. You have to go back to the names. This is the point where there's proof for the reason for them to bow down to Adam. See? But he didn't do that. Okay? Right? He could have said, well, that's kind of unfair. Why didn't you tell me then? You know what I mean? Whatever. Okay, but it has to go back to the name. He didn't go back to the name. It goes back to what? Himself and that guy on a physical level. You see? And this is the other aspect of arrogance. There is an interesting statement by Imam al-Baqir alayhi salam, where he says, if any amount of arrogance enters the heart of a person, it will only bring deficiency to the intellect, with the same amount of what entered it, whether it be a little or a lot. So if you have a little bit of arrogance, your intellect will be deficient. And this is the point where I say, this is the part where I say, for example, that could be to our advantage. Okay, that could be to our advantage, their arrogance, because the Western world, especially the Zionist entity, and the United States, but Europe, especially all of them, have this sense, this feeling that they can beat up everybody, okay? They can dominate everybody. And because they can dominate everybody, everybody is supposed to follow them. This is why Trump right now has all these ships and is still these navies and stuff like that. And, they're still having negotiations, because they want to force upon Iran, a certain decision while they are supposedly, negotiating. Still, it's like, you follow my way or the highway. That's no negotiation. This is arrogance. And when we look at the history of Western arrogance, when people stand up against them, they always win. They always win. I want to encourage you guys to look at, for example, the Vietnam War. Look at what is happening in Gaza right now. Here we have probably what is called the 5th most powerful army in the world, in a small strip of land, fighting against poor people. And these poor people have not succumbed, have not been defeated for over 2 years with the most intense bombing that the world has ever seen. They say the amount of bombing equals about 8 Hiroshimas. Why is this? Because they thought of themselves, these other people, these arrogant people thought of themselves as too powerful to lose. Whereas the other side is saying, okay, I don't have planes, I don't have this, I don't have that, okay? And with that in mind, I am going to use my weakness against their strength. I'm going to use my weakness against their strength. And what is their weakness? For example, their strength being, say, to fly over and bomb people, they would carry out fighting in tunnels. And they would take on patrols or what have you that they can handle. They won't go up front and take on anybody else, but they would ambush and things like that. And the arrogant person loves life, doesn't want to die, because if you die, there's no purpose in your arrogance, okay? So whatever casualties they inflict upon them is devastating upon them. You watch the Vietnam War. The Vietnam War is a very good case in point. The Vietnam War is typified as, fighters, Vietnamese fighters with a rice bowl on their side and wearing sandals and running with an AK-47 while you have phantom jets flying in the sky and so forth. Okay? And this is how they won, by using their own, their own courage, their own ingenuity, their own cleverness to be able to have victory. I want to give you another example. I'm a great boxing fan. I love boxing. I don't box, but I love boxing, right? And one of my favorite boxing matches was between Muhammad Ali, who was about 34 years at the time, which is old age in boxing, right? Fighting George Foreman, who was about 24, 25 years old, okay? And George Foreman used to destroy everybody who came into the ring against him. And if you check out that, there's a documentary about it called When We Were Kings. Very beautiful documentary, okay? Muhammad Ali's team, it was described as when they were in the dressing room, it was like a funeral, okay? Because they thought that George Foreman is going to kill Muhammad Ali. And George Foreman knew, he was arrogant, okay? He knew he was going to destroy Muhammad Ali, okay? And what did Muhammad Ali do? He was a weaker man. He was an older man. But he fought this guy in such a way that he made this man expend all of his energy on him because he wanted to knock him out. And what he did was he used his environment. And the environment in the ring was such that the ropes on the rings were loose. You see, so he could lean back against the rope and to avoid punches. And his thing was to keep blocking the punches and deflecting the punches until this guy, because he believed so much in his superior force, he punched himself out. When I mean punch himself out, he punched and fought and hit and hit and hit so much that he became tired. And that's why he got knocked out. You know, and every time, you know, he came, check it out. It's very nice, right? It's a documentary, When We Were Kings, right? You know, and every time George Foreman would come up to him, Muhammad Ali would say, George, you're punching like a sissy, is that it? George would pow, pow, and he just punched himself out, okay? And he knocked him out. This is how you fight arrogance, okay? One of the things about arrogance is you never back down to arrogance, okay? And this is again advice on from our IMA, okay? We should not behave arrogantly to anybody else except the arrogant. You get it? You should not behave arrogantly to anybody else except the arrogant. Why? Because if you are humble to the arrogant, it feeds his arrogance. See what I mean? Okay? It's like fighting a bully in school. Okay? Even though you might be a weaker kid, you stand up to that bully. You stand up to that bully. And Allah would give you power in your hands to be able to defeat that bully. And even if you lost that fight, that bully would know that he can't mess with you, because every time he came upon you, okay, as a little kid, a little boy, you know, every time he comes upon you, right, he knows you're going to fight back. And bullies like people to cower to them. Okay, so you should never, ever, ever be humble towards an arrogant person. Okay, you should take the role of an arrogant person. It means that you are not arrogant. You should take the role of an arrogant person and treat them with arrogance, because that's the only thing that they respect. So it's a strategy how we deal with arrogance. It's a very important strategy. All right, and when you stand up to people like that, Allah gives you the tools necessary to be able to fight that person. For example, I mean, when I was in, when I grew up in Toronto, Canada, when there was in the 70s, when there was a lot of racism in Canada, right? A lot of racism. Okay, black and brown people were being beaten up by police and all of that. You even had like a racist movement called the Western Guard, that were out there, and we had to stand up against these people. Okay, we had to stand up against them. We had to fight them, and what you found out was that when you stood up and fought. And it's not necessarily always physical. I'm not talking about it being physical only. I'm talking about opening your mouth and challenging somebody's arrogant statements. Okay, even in the classroom, open up your mouth and challenging another person's statement. The teacher's statement. You see, what you started to realize is that you have a certain amount of power to be able to do something. Okay, now I just want to touch on one last point, because it's coming close to Maghrib time. Last point I want to touch upon is that arrogance in our communities, okay? In the Muslim community, you have a certain kind of arrogance, okay? One of the things, that I have experienced and seen, okay, not very much on my part, because maybe of who I am, I guess, but from a lot of other people, is racism in the Muslim community. What is racism? Racism is this: I am better than you. I don't want to have anything to do with you apart from just acknowledging your existence, right? You know, so like, for example, people like me, they would say, oh yeah, you know, you're like Bilal, you know, it's the only token Negro in Muslim history, right? You know, the only token Negro, okay, Bilal, you know, there's nobody else, okay? You know, but you find that in the Muslim community itself, you have inter-ethnic arrogance, okay? You know, you have like Iraqis don't like Egyptians, for example, right? You know what I mean? You know, you have, for example, people from North Pakistan don't like people from South Pakistan. You know, Muhajirun don't like Sindhis. You know, and they have derogatory statements to make about each other. And when you start behaving like this, you are playing the game of the shaitan. Okay, so here you are being arrogant with each other, you know, and on the other side, there is somebody else, you know, being arrogant over all of you all, and they got all the power. This is why Emirates can't do anything. Okay? This is why, for example, you know, I mean, I don't like to talk sectarian, right? But this is why, for example, you find like a lot of Sunnis can't do anything, right? They're too busy trying to beat up on Shias. You know what I'm saying? They're too busy, and beating up on Shias means division. You know, now we are at a time where we should be uniting with each other. And it is happening, but very slowly. And the only reason why it is happening is you have one Muslim group fighting the enemy on behalf of another Muslim group that always tends to think that they are not true Muslims. All right? You know what I mean? And what is happening now is because the resistance front is so largely Shia, it is destroying by one stroke all of these arguments that they have about Shia, all of them. It's just destroying things. And then you find, for example, now we have the Epstein files. You know, and the Epstein files, for example, is another case where you have a good example of arrogance. Israel's behavior is another example of arrogance. They think they're above the law. They think they're above the law. In fact, they don't just think, they know they're above the law. They knew this all the time, but it never came to the forefront until you had a genocide in Palestine. You know, until you have Trump, for example, going against international law and kidnapping, for example, you know, the head of a state in another country and things like that. And it is now coming out in the open. All of these things are coming out in the open. You know, they could get into child trafficking and all of their corruptions and so forth, you know, and presidents and prime ministers and all these types of people would go to Epstein Island and indulge in their things, knowing that, well, we control the media, we control this, we control that, until the circumstances or the conditions change. The conditions change to the extent that now we have the internet. Now we have an alternative means of going past their propaganda and actually getting a glimpse at them for who they are. And now here they are trying their best to try to bring things back to how it was before. No, brothers and sisters, it is going down. It is going down. And eventually we would have to step up and do something. Okay? We have to confront arrogance. We have to. You know, a lot of Muslims, especially our Shias, okay? You know, we think of ourselves as minorities. Oh, we're just, you know, a small group of people, we can't do nothing and that type of stuff. Bro, I am minority squared. Okay? I'm minority squared. You know, and a minority could make a big change in society. Believe me. But you have to be confident in yourself. You have to be confident in yourself. You know, you got the best deen. You got the best madhab. You know, but we don't do anything about it. You know, and when I say the best madhab, it doesn't mean that we are arrogant, huh? Okay? As I mentioned to you before, we tend to be arrogant about things that we think that we have that are positive that other people don't have. It's possible. It's always possible for you to have something positive that somebody else doesn't have. But you shouldn't say that my possession of that thing makes me better than that person. You know, there's a very interesting discussion between the Holy Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam and Abu Dhar, where the Prophet said to Abu Dhar, "Oh Abu Dhar, whoever is having an atom's weight of arrogance in his head, in his heart will never smell the scent of paradise until he repents beforehand. So Abu Dhar asked, O Messenger of Allah, I am fond, I like very much beauty, so much that I wished that the handle of my cane and the lace of my sandal be beautiful. So should I be afraid of them? Abu Dhar says, well, okay, if I have something really nice that I like, should I be afraid because, I like this thing, and that makes me arrogant? The Holy Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam replies, how do you see your heart? Abu Dhar said, I see it knowing the truth and certain of it. Then the Holy Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam replies, that is not arrogance. Rather, arrogance is that you leave the truth and exceed beyond it. And you look at people and you do not see their honor as being like your honor and their blood like yours. Okay? So you might have something nice. You might have a nice car. Okay? You can say, I have a nice car. I like my car. I'm not too crazy about your car. You can say that too. But you don't say I am better than you because I have a nice car. You get what I'm saying? All right? You have to be objective about what you have, and you cannot be attached to it. This is a month of zuhd, really. Ramadan is a month of zuhd. And zuhd means abstinence. Zuhd means not identifying with those things that you have. We know that our Islam is the best religion. We know this, but that does not mean that I, as a Muslim, okay, I, as an individual Muslim, knowing my identity, is better than that Hindu over there. I could say Islam is better than Hinduism, and that also, we have to be very careful about that. But Islam is better than Hinduism, but I am not necessarily better than a Hindu, okay, because that Hindu could be a much better person than me. Okay, I might be following my deen, but be very stingy. I don't give generosity. You know what I mean? I don't give things to people. But that Hindu probably does. You see? And there you have another story where somebody actually mentions this, right? He says to Imam Jafar as-Sadiq alayhi salam, what about if I do a good deed and another person doesn't do a good deed? Can I say that I'm better than that person? The Imam said, well, you don't know if that person would have repented to Allah for that deed. So here you are thinking that you are better than him, where while you saw him doing a sin, at that moment, he also asks Allah for forgiveness at that moment, but because you can't see it, you see? So we should never, ever be afflicted by arrogance. And lastly, there's a very beautiful hadith by Imam Sadiq alayhi salam, where he says, a person is arrogant or tyrannical only as a result of a disgrace he has within himself. So the arrogant person has an inferiority complex. He's got some kind of inferiority. He has some kind of disgrace in himself. And because of this, he compensates by being arrogant. This is why you find a whole lot of cops, for example. I'm not saying we have to be anti-cops, but a whole lot of cops tend to be unjust, right? Why? Because it's a small man, it's a little man inside who wants to be big. So he wears a uniform. He gets into a uniform in order to compensate for his littleness. Because in that society, when him wearing a uniform is a compensation for lack of power, right? So you have to be aware of these types of things, and to be able to understand ourselves and to be able to try to reform ourselves. Inshallah, in this holy month, we do more introspection in ourselves and try to combat all those weaknesses that we have had during the regular days. Try to curb our negative habits as much as possible, and to replace it with good actions that we could continue after the month is over. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Salawat. Allahumma salli ala Muhammadin wa ali Muhammad.
Thank you very much, Sheikh, for this wonderful lecture. Now we're going to pass to the Q&A. If someone has any question, we have a mic.
Sheikh, you said that Iblis saw Adam lying in the garden and saw his physical difference and also his hollowness and believes he could be swayed. But did he believe he could be swayed because of the physical differences and the materials, or that he was hollow without like a thought for himself?
I know that he could be swayed because Iblis could influence him. Okay, you know, there's a hadith that says Iblis runs in our veins, right? You know, Iblis could affect our psychology, you know, and use our weaknesses against us. You know, one of the biggest weaknesses that Iblis can use is anger. You know, when you get really angry, you know, what happens with that is that you lose control of yourself. Okay, and that's where he can attack. So basically, it talks about it being possible for him to influence us. Yeah.
Okay, so it's like a comment basically. Was wondering, would it be accurate to make the difference between if we're talking about arrogance versus confidence, for example? Because I think there are contrasts, like they have similarities and there's differences too. I would say that maybe for a person, for example, that has they have a like either an advantage or whatever, they can be confident without being arrogant. Likewise, the person could also be arrogant. And I think that the difference there would be to say that one either acknowledges what they have versus the other one they attribute it to themselves. So it's a difference between acknowledging that you have a nice car versus thinking that you are the reason because you have this nice car and therefore it elevates you. I don't know if that would be an accurate way of.
Well, first of all, with respect to confidence and arrogance, you know, most arrogant people are confident. You know, it's kind of hard to think about a shy, arrogant person. So it's a contradiction.
Yeah.
Okay. So confidence is one thing, arrogance is something else. But for example, the confidence of an arrogant person might be rash. Okay.
Yeah.
Right. Might be rash. It's like me being a 6 foot something guy, see a guy who's like 5 feet or 5'4", okay, and just thinking because I'm a 6 foot something guy, I can beat that guy up. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Whereas this guy knows Muay Thai and I don't know. You see what I mean?
Yeah.
Right? This is like an overconfident type of thing.
Yeah.
You see? So you might find arrogant people are like that. You know, but if you have confidence and you have a great confidence in yourself, that's not arrogance. You know what I mean? It's only arrogance when you think, you know, that I have this great confidence and X doesn't have this great confidence, then I'm better than X. Because what does it mean? I'm better than X, right? Maybe, okay, X is a doctor, I'm a doctor and X is a nurse, right? You know, but I might be a terrible father. You know, Y could be a great father. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Y could cure people psychologically. They could talk to Y and Y could say, yeah, I'm listening. Oh yeah, I would give you advice and stuff like that. I could be a great doctor, but can't do that. You see, what do you mean I'm better than you? You see what I'm saying? So you see what I'm coming from, right?
Yeah, I understand that. One more thing also. Would it be if we kind of I know there's a way to kind of discover, because there's arrogance that is also hidden. There's a arrogance that is more difficult to see in ourselves, but there's a way to discover it by constantly questioning our intentions, right? So what I find personally, that's the way I understand, is that whenever we question either the intention or the motivation behind a certain action or a feeling or a thought, if we observe that the thing we're trying to attain is a deprivation of someone's right, and that's, for example, the right to their image. Because dominance, for example, is you think that your image is more important than theirs.
Yeah.
That's one way of discovering that this feeling is linked to hidden arrogance, for example. So it's like detecting basically if the energy that you feel has harmful effects to it. I think that's one of the ways maybe to discover it. But.
Yeah, I think arrogance is a feeling that you could detect quite easily. Okay. It's easy to know, to confront or to be aware, you know, that you're looking at somebody with disdain,
Mm.
You know what I mean? And so what you have to do now is try to counteract that. And the best way to counteract that is to be at that person's service.
Mm.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You know, to help them,
Yeah.
for example.
Okay.
Yeah, to go against yourself, right?
Right.
It's a kind of a behavioral therapy kind of thing you're doing right there, right now, you see, for example. Okay? You know, acting against that feeling that you have against that person, to be good to that person and welcoming to that person. That's a good way of overcoming arrogance. Yeah.
Okay. Shukran.
Is there any more questions? Okay, thank you very much.
There's a sister.
Oh, sorry.
So this came to mind when you mentioned there was more than one Adam. So if the story of Adam and Iblis is for this, like the last Adam, and but the angels saw like humans basically killing each other and everything for all the other times. So in that case, does doing all those evil a human thing, or is it because we grew up thinking that it's like Iblis, Shaitan. He's the one who makes he's the one who makes people do evil things. But
he doesn't. He's not the only one.
Yeah, so
we could be shayateen ourselves, huh? Just as equal to Iblis. I mean, take for example Ramadan. I don't want to cut you, right? But take for example Ramadan. Okay, we say Iblis is chained up, right? Okay, so when we do an evil thing in Ramadan, who caused that? That's you. Okay, because we are shayateen too. Iblis is tied up, but we got to tie up our own Iblis in ourselves. You see what I mean? So yeah, that bloodshed and stuff like that is human. You know, on a negative level, it's human. You know, you don't find animals behaving like that. You know what I mean? You'd find it's also jinni, you know, because jinn also have passions and they have intellect and these type of things. Okay, so it's only a certain type of being, you know, could create bloodshed and that type, shed blood and all that type of stuff, have wars and so forth. Yeah. Another question.
We kind
Okay,
of.
so this is what 3 over here and 1 over here. Okay. All right. Let's go.
We kind of had a very brief introduction of who you were before you came in. So I was wondering if it would be, if we could have an introduction, a presentation of
who I am.
Well, yeah, pretty much of like your background, your studies, and your parkour in life.
You want to hire me for something?
I don't know. It's just the first time I see you, so.
Oh, yeah, okay. Yeah, I know that question, how I became a Muslim kind of question, right? Yeah. Well, okay. Yeah. It's a long story, guys. A really long story. You know, I grew up in a very religious home. Okay, a very religious Christian home. My grandmother was I would think my grandmother was like a waliullah, to tell you the truth. You know what I mean? She used to pray a lot and she used to heal people. Okay, you know, with water and dua, Hazrat Maryam. You know, so as a young kid, I grew up knowing that the ghaib existed. And growing up in the 60s and 70s, you know, we in the time of the civil rights movement and anti-colonialism and so forth. So I was swept up in that type of stuff and I became a student activist, you know, a very, very prominent student activist. I moved to Canada when I was 16 and carried on doing that, you know. And in the process, I became radicalized. I became a communist, but I didn't become an atheist because I knew I could see things that my grandmother was doing. Okay, but I like the communist ideology, all right? And a point came where I started to question my communist comrades. Okay, some of them would have real akhlaqi problems, jealousy, treachery, you know, things like that. And I thought, well, if you want to make a better world, you have to make yourself a better person. And at that point, I thought that the only way of thinking that talks about making somebody a better person was religious thinking. But I was not interested in Christianity because I thought Christianity had a problem for me as a black person. Okay? If the white man is ruling us on the earth and we have to overthrow him, how come I be praying to a white man in heaven? How would we answer that? What happens to your psychology here? Jesus was a white man, blue eyes, blonde hair, the whole works, looking up in the sky like this, right? I couldn't do that. So I started to study religions. And I studied all the major religions. While I was in university, it wasn't a course or anything like that, but I studied a lot of the major religions: Judaism, Christianity, Islam, Hinduism, Buddhism, Taoism. These were the main ones. Okay. And I came to a point where I couldn't understand all of it, right? But I came to a point where I saw the beauty in all of them. Okay. And I started to call myself a cosmopolitan religionist. But I couldn't bring them together until one day I went to the bookstore in our university and I came upon a Quran. Okay? And in this Quran, I was curious about it. I knew it was a Muslim holy book, right? But I never studied Islam. So I opened this book, and as I'm opening it, I'm leafing through the book. I'm not like going systematically. I'm starting in the bookstore, looking through this book, And the Quran was speaking with such authority, with such certainty, and everywhere my eyes fell, of course it was in English and Arabic, so I read in English, and wherever my eyes fell, it was like the Holy Quran was talking to me personally, okay? And I became excited so much I started to hyperventilate and stuff like that. I closed the book. I couldn't take it anymore, because I'm reading the words, and the words were sort of like, I was feeling like I was, being filled up like a balloon. Like each word was like air coming into my soul, So I walked out of the bookstore. I said, I found my religion, right? But I didn't know how to become a Muslim, So I was walking around like that, wanting to become a Muslim, but I didn't know how. And then one day, a group of young Muslims came to the campus to do dawah, okay? They were Sunni Muslims. And, they had a table with their books and so on, and, they were engaging with people. And I had just come out of a class. I saw a huge crowd arguing vehemently with some guys, and it was these guys, So as I was coming close, the crowd saw me coming, and they were happy to see me coming because I was kind of famous in the university. I was the baddest DJ in the university, and I was the most revolutionary. So I used to destroy all arguments, right? You know what I mean? And make fun of people like that. You know what I mean? It was fun. It was people skip classes to hear me debate with people. So they saw me coming and they'd be like, yeah, come on over. So I came up there and I saw there was all my buddies, all my homies, arguing with these Muslim guys behind the table. But I wasn't saying anything. And they wanted me to destroy these guys. But they didn't know in my heart I wanted to be a Muslim. So I was watching the argument going like if you're watching tennis, and my friends were upset. Why don't you say something? And these guys sensed something about me, the Muslim guys, right? So they looked at me and they said, do you believe in one God? I said, yeah. So do you believe that God's name is Allah? I said, yeah. So do you believe that Allah sent prophets to mankind? I said, yeah. Do you believe that Prophet Muhammad is the last messenger of Allah? I said, yeah. Then they said, don't you know you're a Muslim? I'm like, yeah. And because he was Sunni, they said, okay, stick your finger out like this. Because, when they're doing tashahud, they're going to bring up the antenna, right? So I stuck my finger out like that in front of all these guys, There was a huge crowd, right? And I did Shahadatain, and that's how I became a Muslim. That was in 1978. 1979, the Islamic Revolution took place. I was a revolutionary, okay? I loved Malcolm X, right? But I never saw the Islamic aspect of Malcolm X as important when I was not a Muslim, okay? I saw the black nationalist aspect more so. And so I started to look at the Islamic Revolution. So I didn't research Islam to become a Sunni, okay? But my Sunni friends were telling me, these Muslims in Iran, you know, they are Shia and they're not real Muslims and stuff like that. And I'm like, that's the kind of Islam I like. So I started to study the history of Shiaism and so on, you know, and I, you know, read books on Saqifa and Battle of Jamal and Siffin and stuff like that. I made acquaintance with some Iranian guys and so on. They would help me get books and so on. And then, yeah, I decided, well, yeah, I'm going to be a Shia. So I was only a Sunni for about a year, you know, and then because I like to read and so on, you know, there were very few books on Shiaism, you know. And I said, well, you know what, man, you know, I'm going to go to Iran because I had been planning to go to Cuba, you know, and to learn how to fight, okay? So I can go back to Trinidad, where I was from, and have a coup d'etat. I was serious, right? And so I went to Iran to learn Farsi and Arabic, just to be able to read books that would be appropriate for me. And the only way you can do that is go to the Hausa. So I didn't go to Iran to be a sheikh. I went to Iran just to learn my deen, you know. So yeah, sometimes I get, what do you call it? What's the word, man? It's a psychological state. Yeah, I can't remember the word. Like when you think that you're not the right person for this job. What do you call it? Imposter syndrome. Sometimes I get that, you know. Right. I guess that's why I'm so kind of unshaky in my behavior. Yeah, but that's how I became a Shia. You know, we are four brothers. Okay. I'm the oldest. The third brother became became Muslim before me. You know, that's another thing. He would take me to Jummah prayers. He was a Sunni, right? He'd take me to Jummah prayer and he says, everything I do, you do, right? You know, I wasn't a Muslim then, you know, so you say Allahu Akbar, I'll go Allahu Akbar, or whatever, you know. And then I became a Muslim, and then we both became Shia together. And then my second brother, he became a Muslim about, I would say, maybe 15 years ago. Okay, he's a Sunni. He married a Somali sister, you know, and but he's a serious Muslim, right? And my third brother, he's in LA. He was in the entertainment business and stuff. He was a pretty, you know, active in the rap scene and stuff like that, you know. And so, about a year ago, you know, he called me and says, "I want to become a Muslim." So I said to him, "Which Muslim you want to be? Do you want to be the ones fighting Israel, or do you want to be the other ones who are like living up in Saudi Arabia?" He said, "I want to be the one like the ones fighting Israel." So he's a Shia too. That's all four of us are Muslims now. Yeah. Yeah. Shias, you guys should make tabligh. You should. I mean, I've come here a number of times and I always mention to you, you might have a good friend that you like on your workplace or in your school or whatever, you know, bring them here. You know, look, I did a lot of tabligh. I converted a lot of people to Islam. And one of the ways you convert people to Islam, a very good way, is to bring them in an Islamic environment. Just bring them there. You know what I mean? Don't try to argue with them about Christianity and You know, give them a good welcome. You know, a lot of Shia places that I might go to that they don't know me, okay? They see me as a stranger, but nobody comes up to you to talk to you. You know, but they talk about you, right? Who's that? What's he doing here? You know what I mean? Go up to them, you know, make them feel at home, make them feel at ease, right? There's a lot of people out there right now who very love Shiaism. You know what's happening in Minneapolis right now, okay? You know, somebody painted a mural with Ayatollah Khamenei's picture on it on a big wall. Did you know that? Right? I say, you know, Ayatollah Khamenei, come and save us, or Iran, come and save us, okay? And I'm sure that no Muslim did that. Definitely no Somali, right? You see what I mean? Where did that come from? People are curious. They want to know about you. They actually do want to know about you. You see what I mean? Right? So just bring them here in an environment like this. Like, you know, somebody like me is coming, bring them. You know what I mean? And, you know, go out there, man. You know, Shias have the best madhab, but the worst muballighin. I'm telling you.
Alhamdulillah. Thank you very much for this
You're welcome.
inspiring lecture. Then we're gonna have 10 minutes. So if anyone will go do wudu, inshallah, the iftar is gonna be here. So the women's side will be there here and the men's side. So I have 10 minutes for wudu and maybe just resting before the salah, inshallah. And for the women, you can go to the women's side to make your wudu.
It was nice seeing you guys. Alhamdulillah, inshallah. You could talk later, inshallah, if you want. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.